At my sister-in-law's baby shower, my mother-in-law announced, Nora's giving Kayla her $42,000 promotion bonus. I said, no. She picked up her coffee and threw it across my chest. While I was still crying from the burns, my husband leaned over me and whispered, just give her the money. I refused again. Then he reached for my work phone. The screen lit up. Ethan read one message and suddenly stopped moving. I had never seen him look that scared before. Then he whispered, Nora, give me the phone. I didn't. My name is Nora Whitman. I'm 36. Welcome to Before She Spoke Stories. I had been chasing the regional director role for 3 years. When Priya from HR finally called, I made her repeat the words because I thought I had misunderstood. Promotion, new salary, and a $42,000 performance bonus. I sat alone in my office staring at the email. The first person I called was Ethan. He sounded thrilled. Then his second question was, how big is the bonus? I noticed. I just chose not to make it mean anything. I didn't grow up seeing money as something fun. When I was 11, our electricity was shut off for 3 days. At 14, I watched my mother count grocery money twice before putting cereal back on the shelf. So that bonus already had a purpose. Emergency savings, mortgage principal, a little breathing room, maybe one vacation I wouldn't finance with guilt. To me, money wasn't status. It was the ability to sleep at night. That evening, Ethan opened champagne. I told him the exact bonus amount because he was my husband. Then I said, please don't tell your family the number yet. He smiled. Why would I? Because Valerie had a habit of hearing good financial news and immediately finding someone who needed help. I didn't say that part. I thought one clear request was enough. 2 days later, Valerie texted me, 42,000, we need to celebrate. I showed Ethan the text. His face barely changed. I told Mom you got promoted. She asked what the bonus was. And you told her? She's my mother, Nora. I reminded him I had specifically asked him not to. He rolled his eyes. You're acting like your compensation is classified information. Maybe it sounded small to him. To me, it was the first sign that something I considered private became family information the moment Ethan learned it. Kayla was 7 months pregnant and trying to plan maternity leave. Her husband Mason had supposedly been laid off recently, and every family conversation revolved around how hard things were for them. Valerie kept saying, they just need help getting through the baby's first few months. I had already bought Kayla a crib mattress and covered part of her shower gift. Then Ethan said, you know, you could really change things for them. I asked what that meant. He said, nothing, just thinking out loud. The week before the shower, Valerie called me. She spent 10 minutes talking about Kayla's medical bills, childcare, and how cruel American maternity leave could be. Then she said, people who are blessed should share the blessing. I knew exactly where the conversation was heading, so I said, Valerie, please don't make plans involving my bonus. She laughed softly. Oh, Nora, nobody's making plans. That sentence should have worried me more. What would you have done at that point? Set a harder boundary immediately, or wait to see whether Valerie actually crossed it? Share your answer, and subscribe to Before She Spoke Stories. Valerie held the baby shower at an expensive brunch venue with floral walls, custom desserts, and nearly 30 guests. Kayla looked beautiful. But underneath it, she looked nervous. Every time someone mentioned maternity leave, she glanced toward Ethan or Valerie. I noticed it twice. Then Mason joked, at least one person in this family has good timing with money. Everyone laughed. I didn't, because Mason looked directly at me when he said it. Halfway through brunch, Valerie stood beside the gift table with a champagne flute. She thanked everyone for supporting Kayla. Then she said, and thank God Nora just received that wonderful promotion. My stomach tightened. Valerie continued, $42,000. Can you believe it? Heads turned toward me. I looked at Ethan. He stared down at his plate. Then Valerie smiled and said, "Family always provides when one of us needs help." Valerie didn't ask me for anything. She announced it. "Nora can cover 6 months so Kayla doesn't have to rush back to work." People actually started clapping. Kayla looked surprised, but not surprised enough. I turned to Ethan. He still wouldn't look at me. Then Kayla said quietly, "I thought Ethan said you wanted to help." That was when I realized somebody had already spoken for me. I said, "No, I never agreed to that." The room went completely silent. Valerie stared at me. "You make 6 figures. That doesn't make my bonus yours." Then she said, "You don't even have children. What exactly are you saving all that money for?" That one hurt more than she knew. I stood up. "This conversation is over." Valerie reached for the coffee beside her. I saw the cup leave the table. Then I saw her arm move toward me. And there was nothing accidental about it. The coffee hit my neck first, then ran across my collarbone and chest. I screamed before I even understood what happened. Someone knocked over a chair. Kayla started crying. Valerie stood there holding the empty cup. Nobody moved for maybe 2 seconds. Then Ethan rushed toward me. I thought he was coming to protect me. Instead, he leaned close and whispered, "Please, Nora, just transfer the money and end this." I stared at Ethan. My skin was burning, my blouse was soaked, and he was still talking about the bonus. Not whether I needed an ambulance, not whether his mother had just assaulted me. The money. I said, "Get away from me." He lowered his voice. "Mom lost control. Don't make this bigger." That sentence did something permanent. Valerie had thrown the coffee, but Ethan was already trying to make my reaction the bigger problem. A venue employee brought cold towels and asked whether I wanted emergency help. Before I could answer, Kayla said, "Mom shouldn't have done that, but now everybody's upset." Everybody. I looked at her. My skin was blistering, and somehow the tragedy was that the shower had become uncomfortable. Mason stood beside her saying nothing. Nobody asked why Valerie believed refusing her access to my money justified throwing anything at me. I called Elise from the car. She met me at urgent care before Ethan did. The nurse treated superficial burns across my upper chest and shoulder, while Elise held the hand that wasn't being examined. I kept apologizing for crying. Finally, she said, "Nora, stop apologizing." That broke me. I whispered, "I think my husband cared more about keeping his mother calm than whether she hurt me." Saying it aloud made it real. Ethan arrived 40 minutes later. He brought my purse. No flowers, no apology. He sat beside the exam bed and said Valerie was embarrassed and Kayla's shower was ruined. Then he added, "If you gave them even part of the bonus, maybe this could settle down." I stared at him. "You're asking me for money while a nurse is treating burns your mother gave me." He looked away. "That's not how I meant it." Ethan reached toward my work phone on the chair beside me. "I'll handle anything from work. You need to rest." Before he touched it, the screen lit up with a message from HR. He read the notification. Then his hand stopped. His face changed so quickly I noticed before I even read the screen. He said, "Nora, don't deal with work right now." I picked up the phone anyway. For the first time that day, Ethan looked genuinely afraid. I stepped into the hallway and called Priya Shah, our HR director. She sounded careful. "Nora, I need to verify something before payroll releases your bonus." I said okay. Then she asked, "Did you contact payroll yesterday asking about changing the deposit instructions?" I stopped walking. "No." There was a pause. Priya said, "Then I'm glad the request didn't clear verification." Suddenly the pain in my chest wasn't the only thing making it hard to breathe. Priya wouldn't give me every detail yet because security was reviewing it. but she told me enough. The caller knew my employee ID, my manager's name, the exact bonus amount, and enough about our internal process to sound legitimate at first. Valerie knew the money. Maybe she knew my title. She did not know my employee ID. I turned toward the treatment room. Ethan was sitting inside, watching me through the glass. At home, I asked him directly. "Did you give Valerie information about my job?" He shook his head. "She probably guessed some things." "My employee ID?" He hesitated, then said, "Maybe she saw paperwork." I asked where. He changed the subject. "Nora, you're exhausted. We should talk tomorrow." That was when I noticed he hadn't asked what HR actually said. Yet somehow he already seemed to know enough to be nervous. I opened my work security log. 2 nights earlier, someone had attempted a password reset at 11:47 p.m. The request came from my home network. I remembered that night clearly. I had gone to bed early. Ethan stayed downstairs watching television. I checked the timestamp again. Then I looked at him sitting across the room. The baby shower had happened today. But whatever was happening with my bonus had started before Valerie ever picked up that coffee cup. I showed Ethan the 11:47 p.m. password reset attempt. He stared at the screen, then admitted he had used my laptop. "I was only checking when the bonus would hit." I asked why. He rubbed his forehead. "Mom wanted to know so Kayla could plan." I said, "You logged into my work account because your mother wanted my payroll date?" He answered, "I was trying to help everybody." There was that word again. Everybody. I called Kayla directly. Before I could explain anything, she said, "Nora, I'm sorry about Mom, but Ethan told me you wanted to help." "With $42,000? She sounded confused. "No. He said 20. I went quiet. Kayla believed I had volunteered $20,000. Valerie had publicly demanded the entire bonus. Different amounts. Same problem. Both women believed my husband had already given them permission to plan around money that belonged to me. I confronted Ethan again. He said he never used the word promise. He told Kayla I was probably willing to help. I asked how that was different when she had already started budgeting around it. His answer was, "I know you, Nora. You always help eventually." That sentence made my stomach turn. He wasn't confused about my generosity. He had simply started treating my past kindness as permission for future withdrawals. Kayla finally admitted Mason hadn't been unemployed for a few weeks. It had been 7 months. Their credit cards were nearly maxed. The car payment was behind. Their hospital deductible was still unpaid. I asked why nobody told me. Kayla said Valerie wanted to avoid making it sound desperate. That was almost funny. They had hidden the severity of the problem, then publicly volunteered my entire bonus as the solution. That evening, Kayla sent me a screenshot. Valerie had created something called Baby Transition Plan. Under Income, one line was highlighted, Nora bonus, $42,000. Below it, my money had already been divided between rent, medical bills, car payments, nursery expenses, and credit cards. I stared at the screen. Nobody had ever asked me, "Can you help?" They had skipped straight to, "How should we spend it?" What would you do after seeing that spreadsheet? Confront everyone immediately or quietly protect the money first? Share your answer and subscribe to Before She Spoke Stories. I opened our old bank records. $4,000 for Kayla's move. $2,700 for Valerie's medical bill. $6,200 for a car repair. $3,000 toward a family vacation balance. Every request had been called temporary. Every time Ethan said his family would repay us, some small payments came back. Most didn't. I had spent 5 years believing I was helping through emergencies. Now I wondered how many emergencies had become expectations. One transfer bothered me. 3 years earlier, Kayla supposedly repaid us $3,000. I remembered feeling relieved because it proved Ethan's family respected loans. Then I traced the deposit. The money had come from our joint savings account. Transferred out by Ethan, routed through another account, then sent back to me under Kayla's name. Kayla had never repaid it. My husband had manufactured the repayment so I would keep saying yes. I put the bank records in front of Ethan. For once, he didn't deny anything. I asked why he made it look like Kayla had paid us back. His answer came quietly. Because you would have stopped helping. I just stared at him. He knew exactly where my boundary was. He knew repeated unpaid loans would make me say no. So instead of respecting that boundary, he created false evidence to keep me generous. By the next morning, the family group chat had its own version of the baby shower. Valerie said the coffee was accidental. She claimed I stood up too quickly during an argument. Then relatives started messaging me. Don't ruin the family over one mistake. One mistake. The burns were still visible across my chest, but the story was already changing from Valerie threw coffee to Nora refuses to forgive. I had seen this system before, just never from the center of it. That afternoon, the brunch venue manager called. She said they were documenting the incident because staff had witnessed it. Then she asked whether I wanted a copy of the security footage preserved. I said yes. That evening, Elise sat beside me while we watched it. Valerie argued with me, reached for the cup, stepped forward, then threw it directly. But what made me replay the clip wasn't Valerie. It was Ethan's voice, seconds earlier. Mom, not here. I replayed the footage 3 times. Seconds before Valerie threw the coffee, Ethan had said, Mom, not here. Not stop. Not don't. Not here. I asked him what that meant. He said he could tell she was angry and wanted her to calm down. Maybe that was true. But the phrase stayed with me, because it sounded less like surprise, and more like someone who already knew how far Valerie could go. 2 days later, my father-in-law Glenn called privately. He sounded exhausted. I should have said something sooner. I asked what he meant. He admitted Valerie had been pressuring him for weeks to convince Ethan that Kayla needed my bonus. Glenn refused because he knew I had never agreed. I said, Then why didn't you warn me? His answer was quiet. Because disagreeing with Valerie has always been easier when someone else is paying the price. Glenn sent me one screenshot from his phone. The message was dated 3 weeks before the baby shower. Valerie had written, Once Nora's bonus clears, Kayla can stop worrying. Not if Nora agrees. Not if Nora helps. Once it clears. I stared at those words until they blurred. The shower wasn't where Valerie got carried away. By then, she had already been treating my bonus like an incoming family payment. My company scheduled a small celebration for my promotion. I almost canceled. Every time someone mentioned the bonus, I saw coffee hitting my chest. I sat in my car outside the office staring at the promotion email. One line said, Your leadership, judgment, and integrity made this decision easy. And I started crying. Because people who only knew me professionally respected qualities my own family had learned to treat like resources they were entitled to use. Elise found me in the parking garage. I told her I hated thinking about the bonus now. She said, Then stop thinking of it as $42,000. I looked at her. She pointed toward my office. That money is attached to 9 years of work they didn't do. That landed differently. For the first time since the shower, I stopped seeing the bonus as the thing destroying my marriage. I saw it as the thing exposing what was already wrong. That afternoon, I opened a new personal bank account. I redirected the bonus, changed every password, removed Ethan from my work recovery contacts, disabled shared banking alerts, updated payroll verification. Then I froze my credit as a precaution. Nothing dramatic happened, no alarms, no confrontation. Just a series of quiet clicks that removed Ethan from places he had never needed to control. By dinner, my money was finally protected from everyone except me. Ethan noticed first. He came into the kitchen holding his phone. "You moved the bonus?" "Yes." "To an account I can't see?" "Yes." His face hardened. "Married people don't hide money from each other." I looked at him. "Married people don't promise it to their mothers." He said that wasn't fair. I reminded him he had already accessed my work account without permission. He had no answer for that. Only anger that access was gone. Kayla came to see me alone. She apologized for the shower. Then, after 20 minutes, she said, "I know 42 was too much, but could you maybe help with 10? I almost admired the nerve. She started crying and asked what she was supposed to do with Mason unemployed and the baby coming. I said, "Change the plan, not my boundary." Then I helped her make a budget. I did not write a check. That budget uncovered something else. Mason admitted he had turned down 2 temporary contract jobs. I asked why. He looked embarrassed. "Valerie said your bonus would carry us until the baby came." Kayla stared at him. "You turned down work because Mom promised Nora's money?" Mason shrugged. "It sounded temporary." I almost laughed. My bonus had become so guaranteed in their minds that grown adults were making employment decisions around money I had never offered. That evening, Priya called again. The internal review was nearly complete. She couldn't give me every conclusion yet, but she said the payroll request had not come from a random outside caller. It had been tied to information available through someone with access to my home devices and personal details. Then she asked, "Nora, does Ethan know the answer format you use for payroll verification?" I looked across the room at my husband. He was already watching me. And before I answered Priya, Ethan said, "Hang up." I didn't hang up. Priya finished explaining what security had found. Then I ended the call and looked at Ethan. He sat down without being asked. After a long silence, he said, "I contacted payroll. Not Valerie, not Kayla, my husband. He claimed he only wanted to see whether part of the bonus could be redirected before it reached my account." I asked, "Without telling me?" He whispered, "I thought I could explain afterward." The more Ethan talked, the worse it became. He hoped to move part of the bonus first, then tell me the money had already been committed to Kayla. He believed I would be angry, but eventually let it go because reversing everything would create too much family drama. That was the strategy. Not permission. Momentum. He was counting on me surrendering once saying no became inconvenient for everyone else. I asked him why he would risk our marriage over money I earned. Ethan looked exhausted. "Because you don't understand Mom. She destroys everyone's peace until she gets what she wants." I stared at him. Then I asked, "So your solution was to let her destroy mine?" He didn't answer. That silence told me more than another confession could. He had protected himself from Valerie by volunteering me as the person who would absorb her anger. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his clothes outside. I told Ethan I needed space and asked him to stay somewhere else while I decided what came next. He looked stunned. "Over one mistake?" I said. "You disclosed my compensation, promised my money, falsified a repayment, accessed my work account, and tried to interfere with my payroll." Then I pointed toward the door. "That is not one mistake. That is a system." He left for Glenn's house. Valerie showed up at my house 2 days later. I didn't invite her inside. She stood on the porch and said, "A baby is coming, Nora, and you're sitting on $42,000. I answered, "No, a baby is coming, and 4 grown adults built a budget around money none of you earned." She said, "Family shares." I replied, "Sharing is when I choose to give. What you did was decide I had no choice." Ethan had come with Glenn and heard everything from the driveway. When Valerie started calling me selfish, he finally stepped between us. "Mom, stop." Valerie looked genuinely shocked. So did I. But I didn't confuse one good sentence with repair. Ethan had spent years avoiding that word. He only found it after his marriage was already breaking. I told him, "I'm glad you finally said it, but I needed you to say it before your mother burned me." Without my bonus, Kayla and Mason had to rebuild their budget honestly. They canceled expensive nursery upgrades, moved toward a cheaper rental. Mason accepted temporary contract work he had previously rejected. Glenn offered a smaller amount from his own savings. Valerie complained that everyone was suffering because Nora wanted to make a point. Kayla surprised me by correcting her. "No, Mom. We're changing our lives because we spent money that was never ours." That was the first real accountability I heard from her. For years, every family emergency ended the same way. Someone panicked. Ethan asked me to help. I paid. Then everyone called the result peace. Now I understood what that peace cost. It required me to keep surrendering before anyone else had to change. So I kept the entire bonus. No guilt transfer. No emergency check. No 10,000 for Kayla. What would you have done with Ethan after his confession? Consider reconciliation with strict boundaries, or end the marriage completely. Share your answer and subscribe to Before She Spoke Stories. A month later, Elise convinced me to take the weekend trip I had postponed for years. Nothing extravagant. A quiet hotel, good food, no family group chat. Before leaving, I transferred part of the bonus into my emergency fund and paid for a professional certification I had always delayed because someone else needed something. For the first time, spending my own money didn't feel selfish. It felt accurate. I had earned it. Nobody else had. Months later, the burns had faded into faint marks. Ethan had started therapy and was finally confronting how deeply Valerie controlled his decisions. I hadn't promised reconciliation. At work, Priya asked whether future bonuses should continue depositing into my new account. I smiled. Yes. My account. My name. Valerie thought the worst thing she did was throw coffee at me. It wasn't. The worst moment was Ethan kneeling beside my burns and asking me for the money anyway. The coffee healed. What came after it showed me exactly what I had to stop giving away.